It started like any ordinary afternoon in our neighborhood. Until one woman, the loudest voice in our HOA, dialed 911 with shaking hands. She thought she was protecting us. She thought she was about to be the hero. But when the police pulled up, flashing lights cutting through the street, everything turned upside down. And what happened in the next few moments left every single one of us staring in silence. Welcome, my friends, to HOA Max Stories. My name's John. I'm a longtime homeowner in a quiet US neighborhood, and for years, I've been living through the wildest HOA dramas you can imagine. And I share them right here, just for you. If you love hearing real neighborhood tales, grab a chair, maybe a cup of coffee, and join me. And hey, before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I'd love to know. Also, if you're over 50, like many of our friends here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's easier than trimming your hedges, and way more fun than sitting through another HOA meeting. That day started so normal. The sun was shining, the air was calm, and I was sitting on my porch, sipping coffee like I always do on quiet afternoons. I could hear birds, the distant sound of kids playing, and the gentle hum of a lawn mower down the street. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. But in my neighborhood, peace never lasts long. Not with our HOA. And especially not with the woman we all secretly called Karen. You see, Karen had a way of turning small things into big fights. If your grass grew half an inch too tall, she'd send you a letter. If your garbage can was out an hour late, she'd complain. And if you painted your door the wrong shade of beige, she'd call a full HOA meeting about it. But that afternoon, she saw something she thought was bigger than all the letters and the meetings combined. She saw my neighbor, a calm, confident woman, walking down the sidewalk with a holstered gun on her hip. Now, here's the thing. In our state, carrying a gun is legal. But Karen didn't care about what's legal. She cared about control. She cared about attention. And she cared about looking like the protector of the neighborhood. I watched from my porch as Karen froze, her eyes locked on the gun like she had just spotted a wild animal. Her mouth dropped open, and I swear I could hear her gasp from across the street. And then, she did what Karen always does. She overreacted. She pulled out her phone, pressed those 3 numbers we all know too well, and started yelling into the receiver. 911? There's a woman with a gun in our neighborhood. Come quick. She's armed. Her voice carried down the street, neighbors poked their heads out of doors, blinds shifted, everybody wanted to know what was happening. Now let me tell you, the woman Karen was pointing at didn't even blink. She stood there, arms crossed, looking completely unbothered. Calm as a summer breeze. Her expression almost said, "Go ahead, make your call." And that calmness made the whole thing even stranger. Because normally, when police are called, people panic. They defend themselves. They argue. But not this woman. She just waited. Quiet. Patient. Karen, on the other hand, was pacing in circles, her voice shrill, her finger pointing like she was a star witness in some big courtroom case. She kept shouting. She has a weapon. She's dangerous. You need to hurry. And the neighborhood gathered, slowly but surely, like we were all being pulled into the drama whether we liked it or not. Some whispered, "Is it true? Is she really carrying?" Others shook their heads, "It's probably nothing. You know Karen." But nobody dared move closer. Everyone just waited. I could feel the tension building in the air, like the seconds before a summer storm. My coffee cup felt heavy in my hand, though it was nearly empty. My eyes kept shifting from Karen, who was fuming and red-faced, to the calm neighbor, who stood tall and silent, like she knew something nobody else did. And then, in the distance, we heard it. The faint sound of sirens. Getting closer. Louder. Karen's face lit up. She puffed out her chest, straightened her shoulders, and looked around at us like she had just saved the entire neighborhood. She mouthed the words, "You're welcome." But me? I wasn't so sure. I couldn't stop staring at the neighbor's calm expression. It was as if she already knew exactly how this would play out, as if she had seen this kind of thing before. The sirens screamed down the street now. Red and blue lights flashed against the houses. A police cruiser pulled up fast, tires crunching the pavement, and then another right behind it. Doors opened. Officers stepped out. Hands ready. Eyes sharp. Karen waved her arms wildly. Over here. That's her. That's the one with the gun. And for a split second, the entire street held its breath. The officers began to move toward the calm woman. The neighborhood gasped. Some kids on bikes froze in place. A dog barked from behind a fence. Karen had that smug smile now, like victory was already hers. She whispered to one of the neighbors, "She's about to learn a lesson." But the calm woman didn't move an inch. She just reached slowly into her pocket, pulled something out, and held it up high. It wasn't a phone. It wasn't an ID card from the HOA. It was a badge. A golden, shining badge. And in that moment, everything flipped upside down. The officers' faces changed instantly. Their stern expressions melted into recognition. Their shoulders straightened. And instead of moving closer with suspicion, they stopped. And then, in perfect unison, they saluted. The entire neighborhood gasped. Karen's jaw dropped. And I nearly dropped my coffee cup right there on the porch. Because the woman Karen had just accused of being dangerous was no ordinary neighbor. She was an FBI agent. Karen's red face turned pale. She stuttered, trying to find words, but nothing came out. She wanted to be the hero, but in that moment, she became the fool. And as the officers lowered their salute and began talking respectfully to the agent, all of us, every single neighbor watching, knew we had just witnessed something we'd never forget. The calmness, the confidence, the way it all flipped in seconds, it was a story our neighborhood would talk about for years. And Karen? She stood frozen, her phone still clutched in her hand, her pride shattering like glass on concrete. Now here's where I want to bring you into this story. Tell me honestly, if you were standing on that street, watching Karen call 911 and then watching the FBI badge come out, whose face would you be watching more closely? Karen's, or the agent's? Drop your answer in the comments, I can't wait to see what you say. The street was silent. Silent in a way that made every sound echo louder. The soft clicking of the officer's boots, the flutter of a flag in the distance, even the rustling of Karen's nervous breath. We had just witnessed something unbelievable, the police saluting a neighbor we barely knew. And the strangest part? She looked completely unfazed, like this wasn't the first time it had happened. Karen, though, was a different story. Her face flushed red again as she tried to gather herself. She wasn't ready to lose. She pointed and stammered, her voice breaking. She can't just, she has a gun. That's against HOA rules. She's dangerous. Don't you see? But the officers didn't even look at her. They spoke calmly to the woman, nodding, showing respect. And every time their eyes met her badge, their tone softened more. I leaned forward on my porch, my hands gripping the wooden armrests of my chair. My heart was still racing. I had so many questions swirling in my mind. Who was she really? Why did she live here, among us, in this quiet neighborhood full of lawn disputes and mailbox complaints? The officers asked her a few questions, but nothing like an interrogation. More like a routine check, just confirming details. She answered quietly, calmly. Not defensive. Not arrogant. Just steady. Karen couldn't take it. She stepped forward, waving her phone like it was evidence in a trial. I have rights. I called you. You have to do something. Her shrill voice cut through the silence, and the neighborhood shifted uncomfortably. Some neighbors shook their heads. Others whispered behind hands. I caught one man mutter, "There she goes again." But the agent, she finally spoke. Her voice was steady, low, but with a weight to it that made us all listen. Ma'am, carrying a weapon is legal in this state. More importantly, I am a federal officer. You are not in danger. Nobody here is in danger." She paused, letting those words sink in. And in that pause, you could almost hear Karen's pride crumbling. The officers didn't scold Karen, didn't arrest her, didn't even raise their voices. They just glanced at her the way teachers look at a student who hasn't done their homework. Disappointment, mixed with exhaustion. And then, one of them chuckled. It was quick, short, but it was there. And I swear, that small laugh broke the tension more than anything else. Neighbors smiled. A couple even laughed quietly. And Karen? She looked like steam might shoot out of her ears. She yelled again, "This is harassment. I'll take this to the HOA board. You'll all see." But her words were losing power. The more she spoke, the smaller she seemed. The agent stayed calm, her eyes steady, never raising her voice. She just said one thing. Sometimes, the loudest voices are the ones hiding the most fear. That line hit the whole street like a hammer. Everyone froze, processing it. Karen opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came out. For the first time, she was speechless. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. My coffee was cold now, but I didn't care. I couldn't take my eyes off the scene unfolding in front of me. The officers, satisfied nothing was wrong, stepped back toward their cars. One of them gave the agent a small nod, almost like a salute without the motion. A gesture of trust. The agent finally walked away, heading back to her house. Calm steps, steady pace. Not rushed. Not flustered. Just unshaken. Karen stood frozen in the middle of the street, phone in hand, mouth half open, but no words coming. And the neighbors? They all started drifting away. Back to porches. Back to conversations. Back to life. But not without whispers. Did you see that? She's FBI? Karen's never gonna live this down. The neighborhood was buzzing like a hive. And at the center of it all was one simple truth: everything had changed. For years, Karen had ruled our HOA with fear. With complaints. With letters and threats. But now, she had been silenced by something bigger than any rule she could quote. A badge. A truth. A calmness that no tantrum could shake. I sat there, thinking about how fragile her power really was. It had seemed so strong, but in that moment, it broke apart like glass. And I realized, we had all been letting her control us with noise. Just noise. That night, the neighborhood was different. You could feel it in the air. People walked their dogs with a little more freedom. Kids rode bikes without their parents yelling, "Don't go too far, Karen might complain." And me? I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail in my head. The flashing lights, the calm badge, the salute, the look on Karen's face. I thought about how thin the line is between order and chaos. About how one phone call, one misunderstanding, can shake an entire street. But mostly, I thought about Karen. About how she would handle this. Would she double down? Would she try to spin the story? Or would this be the day she finally realized she wasn't the queen of the block anymore? And that's what brings me to you, my friends. Because I want to know something from you. If you had a neighbor like Karen, always loud, always causing trouble, always pointing fingers, and you saw her pride crumble like that, would you feel sorry for her? Or would you laugh, knowing she finally got what she deserved? Tell me in the comments. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. The next morning, the air felt different in the neighborhood. It was quiet, too quiet. Usually, you could hear Karen's voice before you even saw her barking orders, complaining about lawns, reminding people of rules nobody cared about. But that day, nothing. Not a word. I walked outside with my coffee, expecting to see her pacing the street, maybe waving papers, maybe trying to convince people she was right. But her blinds were closed, her car was still, her porch empty. And for the first time in years, the street felt peaceful. Neighbors were out earlier than usual. People who normally kept to themselves stopped to talk. You could feel the buzz of the night before still hanging in the air. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had heard about it. And now, everyone had an opinion. Mrs. Davis from 2 houses down whispered to me, "Did you really see the badge?" I nodded. Her eyes went wide. FBI? Living here? I shrugged. That's what it looked like. Word spread fast. By noon, it wasn't just our block, the whole HOA was buzzing. People shared versions of the story like gossip in a small-town diner. Some swore the agent was undercover. Others said she was high up, maybe a special investigator. And Karen? She became the punchline. Everywhere I turned, people were whispering about her meltdown. Her dramatic 911 call. The way the officers saluted. The way she froze, mouth open, completely powerless. But here's the thing, people like Karen don't disappear. They regroup. They plot. They wait. And by the afternoon, sure enough, she appeared. Her blinds opened first. Then her door creaked. And out she came, phone in hand, chin high, eyes darting left and right like a general surveying a battlefield. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't broken either. No, she looked like someone planning her next move. She marched to her car, pulled a stack of folders from the trunk, and slammed them onto her porch table. The sound echoed down the street. And even though nobody wanted to admit it, we all watched. Curtains shifted. Gates squeaked. People peeked. Karen cleared her throat loud enough for everyone to hear and started flipping through her papers. She muttered things like violations, safety, board meeting. Her voice wasn't as strong as usual, but it was still there. I shook my head. The woman had just embarrassed herself in front of the whole neighborhood, but here she was, trying to rebuild her little kingdom of power, one rule at a time. Later that evening, she made her move. She started going door to door. Not to apologize. Not to explain. But to recruit. I saw her knock on Mr. Thompson's door across the street. He's a quiet man, keeps to himself. Karen waved her papers in his face, talking fast. He nodded a few times, but his expression stayed blank. She left frustrated. She tried the Johnsons next. Same routine papers, complaints, lots of finger pointing. But I could tell by their polite smiles they weren't buying it. Still, Karen didn't stop. She walked from house to house, trying to spin the story, trying to make herself the victim. She threatened me with a gun. I heard her yell once. She made the police cover for her, she cried at another. She's dangerous. We need to vote on this. But here's the problem for Karen, the neighborhood had seen the truth with their own eyes. And no pile of papers, no shouting, no rules could erase what they saw. The comm agent, the flashing badge, the salute. And for the first time ever, Karen's voice wasn't the loudest. It was just noise in the background. That night, I walked past her house on my way back from a stroll. Her porch light was on, and she was sitting there, alone, surrounded by her papers, muttering to herself. I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered her smug face when she called 911. The way she tried to paint a neighbor as a criminal just to feel powerful. And the pity faded. The next day, something happened that sealed her fate even more. The agent, the neighbor Karen had tried to shame, stepped out of her house, not with a gun, not with a badge, but with a simple wave. She walked her dog down the street, smiled at people, even stopped to chat with Mrs. Davis. Her calmness was contagious. People smiled back. People greeted her warmly. And in that moment, it was clear, the neighborhood had chosen sides. Karen glared from her window, blinds half open, watching. Her kingdom was slipping away, and she knew it. The power she once had, the fear she used to spread, was gone. And in its place was something she couldn't fight, respect for someone else. I sat on my porch, watching all of this unfold, and I thought to myself, maybe this is what true justice looks like. Not handcuffs, not shouting, not punishments. Just the truth standing tall, calm, unshaken, while the liar crumbles under her own weight. But I also knew Karen wasn't done. People like her rarely accept defeat. They twist it, spin it, and come back with more fire. The question was, how far would she go next time? And that's what I want to ask you, my friends. If you had a neighbor like Karen, a person who just can't accept defeat, who always comes back louder, no matter how wrong they are, what would you do? Would you ignore her until she runs out of steam? Or would you confront her head-on, once and for all? Tell me in the comments, because I know many of you have lived with a Karen of your own. The tension in our neighborhood didn't disappear overnight, it only shifted. Karen had lost her grip, but she wasn't letting go. You could feel it, like a storm that had passed but left the air heavy, waiting for the next crack of thunder. Every morning I'd sit on my porch with my coffee, and I'd catch her staring. Sometimes from her window, sometimes from her yard, sometimes even standing in the middle of the street with her phone in her hand, pretending to take notes. But the strange thing was, she wasn't just watching the FBI agent anymore. She was watching all of us. It was like she was trying to figure out who was still on her side. Who might support her if she called for another meeting? Who might believe her stories? I noticed little things too. Neighbors weren't afraid to talk openly anymore. People waved at the agent. They chatted with her when she walked her dog. They even invited her into conversations on the sidewalk. And Karen? She stood alone. One afternoon, the HOA board gathered for its usual monthly meeting at the clubhouse. Normally, Karen sat in the front, controlling the room, flipping through her binder of violations. But that night, everything felt different. I walked in and felt the shift instantly. Neighbors sat straighter. Conversations were louder. And when Karen walked in, clutching her thick folders, nobody hushed like before. They just kept talking, smiling, laughing. It was as if she had lost the ability to command silence. She slammed her binder onto the table. Papers flew out the sides. Order! We need order, she barked. But the board president didn't jump this time. Instead, he calmly cleared his throat and said, "Karen, please sit down. We'll start when everyone's ready." Her eyes widened. She looked around, expecting the usual nods of support. But all she got were blank stares, and a few smirks. The meeting began, but Karen wasn't listening. She flipped pages, tapped her pen, scribbled notes furiously. And then she raised her hand. "I'd like to address the incident last week. A violation of our community safety. A resident was armed on the street. This is against our HOA standards, and I demand immediate action." The room went silent, but not in the way she wanted. It wasn't respect. It was disbelief. Finally, one neighbor spoke up. "Karen, that resident is an FBI agent. You called 911 on her. The police respected her. Maybe we should too." Murmurs spread. Heads nodded. Even the board members exchanged glances. Karen's face turned crimson. She slammed her hand down. "I don't care if she's FBI. This is our community. We make the rules here. Not her badge. Not her job. Us." The president sighed. "Karen, sometimes the rules you push aren't about safety. They're about control. Maybe it's time to let this go." The words hit her like a slap. She looked around, desperate for an ally. But nobody moved. Not one hand lifted in support. For the first time, Karen's power collapsed, not because of the FBI badge, but because the neighborhood finally saw her for what she was. I sat there, stunned. I'd been waiting for this moment for years, the day when Karen's voice wasn't the loudest in the room. And now it was happening right before my eyes. But Karen wasn't done. Not yet. She stood, clutching her folder, her voice trembling with rage. "If you won't listen, I'll take this higher. I'll call the county. I'll call the state. I'll call whoever I have to. You people will regret this." And with that, she stormed out of the clubhouse, papers spilling behind her like a trail of broken pride. The room exhaled. People leaned back in their chairs, smiling, whispering, almost laughing. Someone even said, "About time." But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the type to retreat quietly. No, she was the type to come back swinging harder. And I knew she'd be plotting even as she drove home that night. The next morning confirmed it. I woke up to find a note on my mailbox. Not a kind note. Not a friendly one. A violation notice. Karen's handwriting. She claimed my porch light was too bright. Too bright. My neighbors got them too. One for grass length. One for trash cans. One for a decorative flag. She was lashing out, trying to remind us she still had claws. But something had changed. Nobody was scared anymore. We laughed about it, compared our notices, even joked about framing them. Karen's weapon had always been fear. But fear only works if people believe it. And now, we didn't. Still, I couldn't ignore the fire in her eyes when she walked by. It wasn't just anger. It was desperation. The kind of desperation that makes people do reckless things. And that's what scared me more than any violation letter. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't the last battle. Karen had lost the crowd, lost her grip, lost her control. But a person like that? They don't just walk away. They look for new ways to fight. As I sat on my porch that evening, watching the sun dip behind the houses, I asked myself something I still can't answer. How far would Karen really go to get back the power she lost? And that's what I want to ask you too. If someone like her lived on your street, desperate, cornered, willing to do anything just to feel in control again, would you stand up and confront her head on? Or would you stay quiet, hoping she burns herself out? Tell me in the comments, because I know many of you have faced a neighbor just like her. The tension didn't fade, it grew heavier with every passing day. Karen had lost the room at the HOA meeting, she had lost the respect of the neighbors, but what she hadn't lost was her obsession. And that obsession made her dangerous in a new way. One evening, I noticed her walking slowly past the FBI agent's house. Not just once. Not casually. Over and over again. Her phone was in her hand, the camera pointed at the house, snapping pictures. She muttered things under her breath, shaking her head like she was preparing for a trial only she believed in. The rest of us tried to ignore it, but you could feel the unease. People whispered, "She's up to something, she won't let this go." Even the kids stopped playing near her house, pedaling their bikes faster whenever they had to pass it. That night, around 9 o'clock, I was sitting on my porch when I heard raised voices. At first, I thought it was just another argument inside a home, but then I realized it was Karen. She was standing in the middle of the street, yelling at the top of her lungs. "She's a threat. She shouldn't be here. This is our neighborhood." Her voice echoed, lights flicked on, curtains moved, and neighbors peeked out. And then, as if on cue, the FBI agent herself stepped outside. Calm. Steady. Just like always. She didn't shout back. She didn't wave her badge. She just looked at Karen with a silence that was louder than any words. And that silence, it broke Karen more than anything. She screamed, "You think you're above us? You think your badge makes you untouchable? But this is MY Street. My rules." The agent finally spoke. "This street doesn't belong to you, Karen. It belongs to everyone. And the more you try to control it, the more you lose it." The words cut through the night like a knife. And the strangest thing happened, neighbors began stepping outside. One by one. Some crossed their arms. Some shook their heads. Some whispered. But all eyes were on Karen now, not with fear, but with disbelief. For the first time ever, the neighborhood stood united. And Karen was alone in the middle of the street. Her hands shook. She pointed at the agent again. "You'll regret this. All of you will regret this." And then she stormed off, disappearing into her house, slamming the door so hard the sound echoed down the block. The street stayed quiet for a long moment until someone finally chuckled. Then another. And then laughter spread, quiet at first, then louder. Not cruel, but almost like a release, years of frustration breaking loose all at once. But deep down, I wasn't laughing. Because I knew Karen wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The very next day, she escalated again. Letters. Dozens of them. Each mailbox stuffed with her typed reports. She accused the agent of breaking rules, of endangering lives, of using her badge to intimidate. She even accused some of us, her neighbors, of being accomplices, for allowing it to happen. People read the letters, shook their heads, and tossed them straight into the trash. But Karen didn't stop. She marched door to door again, trying to rally support. This time, though, doors didn't open. Curtains stayed closed. Voices called through the glass, "No thank you, Karen." Her power was gone, but her anger was not. One evening, I caught a glimpse of her sitting in her car, parked across the street from the agent's house. Lights off. Engine running. Just sitting there, watching. It sent a chill down my spine. I wondered if she was planning something bigger. Something reckless. And the thought made me uneasy in a way I hadn't felt before. Because it was no longer just about HOA rules, or grass, or mailboxes. This had become personal for Karen. Obsession. Control. Ego. And when someone like that feels cornered, you never know what they're capable of. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her words, about her face, about the way she watched from her car. My neighborhood no longer felt safe, not because of crime, not because of strangers, but because of one woman who couldn't let go. The next morning, the FBI agent walked her dog again. Calm. Collected. She even smiled at me when she passed my porch. I smiled back, but inside I was thinking, how long can she stay calm if Karen keeps pushing? How long before patience runs out? The neighborhood was at a breaking point. And all of us could feel it. I sat with that thought as the day went on, watching neighbors mow their lawns, kids ride their bikes, mail carriers making their rounds. All the while, Karen's blinds twitched. Her shadow moved behind the glass. She was still there, still watching, still waiting. And I asked myself, how do you deal with someone like that? Someone who doesn't quit, no matter how wrong they are? And now I ask you, my friends. If you were in our place, living just a few houses down from someone like Karen, watching her spiral deeper into obsession, would you confront her directly to put an end to it? Or would you ignore her, hoping her fire burns out on its own? Tell me in the comments, because I think our whole neighborhood was divided on that very question. The breaking point came on a night none of us expected. It was a Friday evening, calm and warm, the kind of night when neighbors sit on porches and kids chase fireflies. But under that calm, there was a tension in the air you couldn't ignore. We all felt it, because Karen had been growing quieter on the outside, but her eyes, her pacing, her constant watching told us something bigger was coming. And then, it happened. Just after 8 o'clock, I heard shouting. Not the usual HOA scolding, not her muttering on the phone. This was louder. Angrier. More desperate. I stepped outside and saw her standing in the street again, papers clutched in one hand, her phone in the other, yelling for the whole block to hear. She's breaking the law. She's a fraud. And you all are blind for letting her stay here. Neighbors peeked out of windows, some stepped onto porches, but nobody approached her. They didn't need to. Because at that very moment, the FBI agent walked out of her house. She wasn't in uniform, just jeans and a plain shirt, but the way she carried herself, steady, confident, it was enough to silence the night. Karen pointed at her, screaming. You think you're better than us? You think your badge makes you untouchable? Not here. Not in my neighborhood. The agent didn't raise her voice. She didn't even look angry. She just said, calmly, Karen, stop. But that word only made her explode. She threw her papers in the air, pages fluttering across the street like angry birds, and screamed, No. I won't stop. I'll call every authority, every lawyer, every news channel if I have to. You can't live here with that gun. You can't." Her voice cracked, tears forming in her eyes, but her anger burned hotter than ever. And that's when she made the mistake that sealed her fate. She lunged forward. Not far, not violently, but just enough, pointing her finger inches from the agent's face, shouting threats. The whole street gasped. I held my breath. This was it. The moment we'd all been dreading. The agent didn't flinch. She simply reached into her pocket and pulled out the badge again. Slowly. Firmly. And this time, she didn't just hold it up. She spoke with authority. Karen, I am a federal agent. You have harassed me, harassed this community, and wasted police resources. This ends tonight. Her voice was calm but sharp as glass. You could feel the weight of it in your chest. The kind of voice that doesn't just request respect, it demands it. Karen froze. Her hand shook. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked around, desperate for support, but saw only eyes staring back, tired, fed up, done. And then, the sound we all knew too well. Sirens. Red and blue lights danced across the houses once again as police cars pulled up. Only this time, it wasn't because of Karen's call. It was because of the agents. The officers stepped out quickly, moving toward the scene. Karen tried to regain her footing, shouting, "She's the one breaking rules. Arrest her. She's dangerous." But the officers didn't even look at her. They walked straight to the agent, listened to her, nodded firmly, and then turned toward Karen. "Ma'am," one officer said, "we've had enough of these calls. You've been warned before. Tonight you crossed a line." Karen's eyes widened. No, you don't understand." But the officers didn't let her finish. They didn't cuff her, not yet. But they surrounded her, firm voices telling her to calm down, to step back, to stop harassing her neighbors. The whole street stood watching. Some neighbors whispered, some even clapped quietly, but nobody interfered. We all knew this was long overdue. Karen's shoulders slumped. For the first time, she looked small. Not powerful. Not intimidating. Just small. The agent turned to the crowd and said simply, "This community deserves peace. Don't let noise take that from you." And with that, she walked back to her house, her dog waiting patiently at the gate. Calm, steady, unshaken, as always. Karen, on the other hand, was escorted back to her porch by the officers. They stayed for a long time, talking, warning, writing things down. By the time they left, Karen's face was pale. She didn't shout anymore. She didn't pace. She just sat there, silent, clutching her phone like it was the only thing she had left. The neighborhood slowly returned to life. Kids went back to chasing fireflies. Parents talked on porches. People shook their heads and said things like, "Finally," and "It was only a matter of time." But me? I sat there, my coffee long gone cold, thinking about what we had just witnessed. A woman who once ruled through fear, brought down not by shouting, not by retaliation, but by calmness, patience, and truth. And yet, a part of me still wondered. Was this really the end? Or was Karen just waiting for another chance to claw her way back? Because people like her, they don't give up easily. They fight shadows, they invent enemies, they feed off conflict. And if they can't win with power, sometimes they try with pity. As I sat there under the quiet night sky, I couldn't shake one thought from my mind. If Karen came knocking on my door tomorrow, begging me to take her side, claiming she was the real victim all along, would I listen to her story, or close the door before she even finished? What would you do? Tell me in the comments, because I know every neighborhood has someone who doesn't know when to stop. The night after the police left, the neighborhood felt lighter, but also strange. For the first time in years, Karen's voice wasn't echoing through the street. No barking orders. No threats. No complaints about grass, trash cans, or mailboxes. Just silence. And silence, in our neighborhood, felt like a miracle. The next morning, I walked outside expecting the usual drama, but Karen's blinds were closed tight, her porch empty, her car still. Neighbors whispered, maybe she finally learned her lesson. Others laughed and said, she's probably writing more letters. I didn't know which one to believe. But deep down, I felt something had shifted. Something permanent. The FBI agent came out later that morning, walking her dog as usual. Calm. Confident. Not a trace of worry on her face. Neighbors greeted her warmly, real smiles this time, not the nervous kind we used to give each other when Karen was watching. Mrs. Davis even brought her cookies. Mr. Thompson, who barely spoke to anyone, shook her hand. And the kids? They cheered when she waved. It was like the whole block had chosen peace, and chosen her. Meanwhile, Karen stayed hidden. 4 days. No letters. No calls. No patrols down the street. Just silence. And in that silence, life bloomed. People sat on porches again. Kids played freely. Neighbors laughed together without fear of her complaints. It felt like the neighborhood we always wanted but never had. But then, about a week later, Karen returned. Not storming. Not shouting. Just walking slowly down the street, clutching a small stack of papers. She looked different. Tired. Smaller. Like all the fire had burned out of her. She stopped at each mailbox, carefully sliding in an envelope. She didn't knock. She didn't yell. She just left them quietly and moved on. When I found mine, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to tear it up and toss it in the trash. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Inside was a letter, but not the kind I expected. No threats. No violations. No rules. Just a few shaky words written by hand. I only wanted to protect this neighborhood. I see now I went too far. I hope one day you'll understand. I read it twice, not sure how to feel. Was it sincere? Or just another trick to win pity? I couldn't tell. Some neighbors tore theirs up immediately. Others shrugged and said, too little, too late. A few kept theirs, maybe as proof of the day the mighty Karen finally bent. That night, I sat on my porch and watched her. She stood in her yard, looking around like she was seeing the street for the first time. Not as a battlefield. Not as her kingdom. But as a place she no longer controlled. And I realized something. Karen wasn't the villain of some storybook. She was just a woman who let her need for control eat her alive. She wanted power so badly she forgot what mattered: peace, trust, community. The FBI agent didn't defeat her with force. She defeated her with calmness. With truth. With a badge that spoke louder than Karen's voice ever could. And the rest of us? We defeated her by finally seeing through the noise. By standing together instead of standing in fear. From that day on, our neighborhood changed. Meetings were quieter. Rules still existed, but they weren't weapons anymore. People smiled more. Talked more. Laughed more. And Karen? She still lives here. But she's not the same. She walks slower. She talks softer. Sometimes she even avoids eye contact. And maybe that's her punishment, living among the very people who saw her pride crumble. Sometimes I wonder if she regrets it all. If she lies awake at night, replaying the moment the officers saluted the FBI agent instead of her. The moment her empire of fear fell apart in seconds. And sometimes, I almost feel sorry for her. Almost. But then I remember the way she dialed 911, her voice dripping with false heroism, ready to ruin someone's life just to feel important. And that pity disappears. The truth is, she got exactly what she deserved. And now, when I sit on my porch with my coffee, listening to kids laugh and dogs bark, I smile. Because peace finally came back to our street. Not because the rules changed, but because we did. We stopped letting one voice control us. We chose calm over chaos. We chose respect over fear. And that, my friends, is how one dramatic night changed everything. Now I want to ask you something, because this story isn't just mine. It belongs to anyone who has ever lived under the shadow of a Karen. If you were in my neighborhood that night watching her pride collapse, watching the bad shine, watching the crowd finally stand together, would you have felt sorry for her in that moment? Or would you have smiled, knowing justice finally came without a single shout? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious to see where your heart stands.